Welcome to The Future of VR Hardware, presented by HP. Please welcome your panelists Roy Taylor, Zach Jaffe, and Joy Lyons, and moderator Rick Champagne.
Thank you, dear voice of God. That was a wonderful introduction. I'd also like to introduce Winslow Porter, the co-creator, producer, and creative director, creative technologist of Giant VR, if you've seen that over in the Technicolor booth. If you haven't, you definitely have to see that. All right, so we're here today to talk about the future of VR technology or VR hardware. There are so many things going on right now. Going out on the floor, there are amazing things happening in the headset world. Everything's really heating up there, but we have some panelists here that represent some great cross sections, things that really enhance the VR experience and drive people deeper and deeper into immersion. And so as we look to the future, there are things that maybe we can only say under NDA, but then there are other things, obviously, that we're not just looking at sort of the obvious path. There's that second bounce of the ball. What's coming after that? How do we bring people deeper into immersion, and how does hardware play a role in that? Winslow has been a content creator, and I think there's a great story between the hardware manufacturers and the content creation. So I think there's going to be some interesting things that come out of that. But so I'm with HP. I'm the worldwide segment manager for media and entertainment, and so I'll just start at the platform, and then we'll work our way out of there. And so the first thing, so HP was showing the Omen X VR backpack at the event. So this is really that next step of immersion is cutting the cable. So we can't be tethered. If you're doing a full 360 and you're spinning, you're dancing, you're in a completely different world and you want to have the freedom to walk around, you need to cut the cable. So that's what this does. And so that's the starting point. We also look at it from content creation and content consumption. And I think that's an interesting way to look at it because we do the workstations. You need to have something powerful on the creation side. You're working with different tools than you are just on the consumption. So Roy, I think I'm going to start with you because really for content creators, you have a set of tools or you have specific hardware, and then of course you also have a consumption side, much like HP, where you have commercial and consumer. So the GPU is playing an extremely important role in all of this. Where are we going? What are the requirements, and where do we go from here, basically?
Yeah, it's a great question. If you look at the current specification of what we have today with the HTC Vive and the Oculus, it's around 2K resolution at 90 frames a second with about 10 milliseconds of latency. Well, that's roughly approximate about 8 teraflops. But I think that where we want to go is going to be 16K per eye. And we want to be out of a peak of 144 frames a second with sustained 90 with zero latency. That's about 743 teraflops, or 81 times more performance than we have today. That's good job security. Unfortunately, I probably won't be here to see it unless we can develop nanotechnology pretty fast too. But I think it gives you a glimpse at kind of the task in front of us.
Absolutely. And so today, just driving a standard headset, we're looking at, and the other thing is you talked about in your keynote is really driving the price down, making VR accessible to everybody. That's, I think, another problem that we've been facing. So can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've got to make it cheaper. I did talk about my keynote. I don't want to repeat the things I said yesterday, except to say that I must have struck a chord because CyberPower sold a lot of those PCs. So clearly having something which can run all VR for $680 counts.
Right.
We've got to get the price down. We absolutely have. When I say we, I mean that means all of you. You all, if your friend's going to go and buy a PC and it's $1,000, if he wants to spend $1,000, let him, of course. But if your other friends can't afford $1,000, let them know they don't have to. We invented a graphics card for $199, the RX 480. So that your friend who doesn't have $1,000 can afford VR. And we're not done yet either, by the way. We want to get our other cards to run VR too, even lower priced. We think that's really, really important. And from my heart, I appeal to all of you to let people know that VR is affordable.
Excellent. And so, creating a visual experience, obviously, that's really, the thing that keeps people from getting sick, right? So you have to have that super high power. And Winslow, you've experienced some of this too. So can you talk a bit about, you've been on the road, you've been sharing giant VR with a lot of people. You were at Sundance, you were at the Cannes Film Festival. And so you experienced in the early days latency. And can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. So I used to work on the agency side of things in New York. Our team is mostly based in New York, but we were building experiences that were using a wide variety of components, and we sort of referred to as the Franken computer, which when we first started the Project Giant, which Rick was talking about. It's a 6-minute cinematic VR piece where we're mixing live action video and also Unreal Engine. But when we first started, we were using sort of a cobbled together computer, and we were getting maybe 43 frames. And everyone who we tried to throw in, we would wait for people to do user testing until they hadn't eaten food for a while. So make sure that there was, we put lay a tarp down, but just make sure that we was making people, visibly ill, because it's all about, where we can put cues so they can explore the room. But then we realized, that we needed to sort of up our game, and it wasn't easy to be able to do that with the resources that we had, which is, we then worked with HP and NVIDIA to be able to bring our frame rate well above 90, right around, I think right now it's at 103, but that was paramount for us. Anytime you bring the user out, or they sort of notice something, like if the frames aren't catching up to where they're looking, that will kick them out of the experience. And without presence, without having full immersion, then it's not even worth having an experience. I think a bad VR experience, is worse than not having any experience at all.
Yeah. So interestingly, creators are doing things that are breaking boundaries. They're using all these awesome game engines like Unreal, Unity, Crytek, and so on. And so we're showing, has anyone seen the Samskara, dome projection in our booth, the HP and Radeon booth? So amazing things going on there. But he's also created, Android Jones has also created something called Microdose VR. And he's running that on the FirePro W9100 GPUs from AMD. And he's emitting these particle systems. Think about Tilt Brush, but with a particle system. And it's got this amazing music. He's also using the subpack to again, drive deeper immersion for people, so you can feel the experience as you're painting and you're creating. But these particle systems are crazy, and there's so much that he's driving on that GPU, and so that's pretty cool to see. But again, to get deeper into that immersion, maybe Zach, you can talk a bit about subpack and your mission with what you're doing there.
Yeah, so in reality, we experience audio with our whole bodies. We're never just experiencing audio with our ears, whether it's a car driving by or someone with a deep voice speaking to you. Your body is always picking up sound, and whether we realize it or not. We're not purely ear-based hearers, for lack of a better word. We're always feeling sound. So if we're trying to replicate reality in virtual reality, the brain can get confused if it's not actually feeling audio like you would if you were in reality. And you talked about motion sickness. We've actually found that the subpack has a grounding effect on people when they're in VR who would normally get sick in different experiences, because the brain, something about the lizard brain in there, makes you be fully present. Okay, I'm feeling it, so I'm actually there. So there's really, you say doing a VR experience that's bad is worse than not doing one at all. Yeah, I firmly believe that doing a VR experience without actually feeling it is not as compelling, because you're not actually being touched by the content. And, as a creator, I implore people who are making content to speak to us and let us know what you're doing, what your goals are, because we're taking a very collaborative approach to what we're doing. And how can we help you get your message not heard and seen, but also felt, which is just more compelling, because who doesn't like having a nice pleasurable bass vibration on their body?
Actually, we'll get back to that in a minute, and we'll look forward into the future too. But Joy, so all that makes sense. You have to feel sound, but also when you're in a VR experience, there's also depth and you know, there are other things with audio that you have to consider. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what OSIC does.
Sure. So OSIC, we develop 3D audio solutions that calibrate to the individual that's wearing them. So basically, you've spent your whole life learning where sounds are coming from. You're perceiving sound constantly, even with your eyes closed. You never close your ears. So you're constantly getting information about the size and the scale of the room you're in, where things are relative to you. They're calling your attention to different objects or different sort of actions that are happening around you. So this is a sense that you've developed with your ears and your body and your anatomy. So basically the sound waves interact with you and your head and your ears. And it turns out that if you don't hear with your actual HRTF, or that's sort of the set of data that sort of describes your ear shape and head size as it relates to sound, if you don't hear with your HRTF, basically you're hearing sounds at the wrong location. You're hearing sounds that don't sound properly. And so what we do is we have headphones, is our first product at least, that have sensors within it that can measure you and calibrate to you. So your senses need to match to you in order to really have a sense of immersion and depth.
So I find it fascinating that, you know, when we start bringing a lot of these things together, you know, the visual experience, the audio experience, it's a deeper level of immersion. And so, and Winslow, you're doing some work with audio as well.
Yeah, I mean, audio is sort of like it's sort of a thankless, or it's one of those things where you only, when it works well, you don't notice it. But if it's not doing you any justice, then it will pop out. But it should be, for us, it's probably 50% of the experience. I mean, Giant could exist just as its own, as an audio piece, where I'm not sure exactly what that experience would be if it were just visual, because you would sort of lose some of that. But yeah, we worked with, we did 2 different sort of passes on the sound. The first one was done by a Serbian sound designer, Alexander Prodic, who actually lived during the bombings that were happening in 1999, the NATO bombings in Serbia. And so he was able to sort of, in our piece, it's a family in a basement that's trying, they create a fairy tale to be able to protect their daughter from the bombs that are approaching. So for us, it was really important to use to work with somebody who had experienced that themselves, so they could really bring that out, so the viewer could experience what it was like to be in the basement with his family. And so we used some actual real sirens from that. And then we were fortunate enough to be able to also work with Scott Gershon and his team after we premiered at Sundance. So he was able to really add an extra polish to the audio, and also as a dream when I was a little kid, I never expected to be able to have a project of mine have Foley recorded at Paramount Studios. And so that was really amazing, because it added a whole nother level. You don't think about it, but you know, when the parents are together, you hear their fabric sort of, you know, being like ruffling against each other, and also like, you know, the footsteps. But just those are the things that, you know, subconsciously you don't realize them, but they immerse you so much further. And you know, we're really excited for our next project. You know, sound being not just the audio mix or the sound effects, but also the music being something that can sort of immerse people in the environment, and it also encourages them to explore. You know, it's not like it'll be a piano where you could be hitting a wrong note, but we want to have it so that it's quantized, so that they'll always be on the beat, and that it encourages them to be able to explore the different variations of sort of pre-programmed patterns, so they won't be able to do something wrong, but sort of further explore the environment to see what else they can do in that. So yeah, audio for us is huge. I would say about 50% of the project.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say I agree with all of my fellow panelists about audio. I think as consumers, as users, we've actually been poorly served by audio until now, and here's the reason. You know, if you're a movie director, you have to consider your worst case scenario, and that could be that someone's in a relatively low-cost auditorium and they may be placed 100 feet away from the nearest speaker. And if you're a games maker, you have to consider that the console is probably going to be plugged into a television and you've got television speakers. So if you go to your boss and say, I want to spend another $1 million on audio, he's going to say, no, the return of investment isn't there. And you'll appreciate that when I say to you, for example, that most of the audio we get tends to be environmental and dramatic. You don't get a lot of whispering in films or games because it's very hard to replicate. With VR, that's different. We know that you're going to have a headset on. In every single instance, you're going to have a headset on. And so as a result of that, I think, you know, for storytellers and filmmakers, audio is going to give you a whole new way to tell stories. And so, I couldn't be more in agreement with all of my panelists here.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, if I guess you can consider the domes from Full Dome Pro who are partnered with us in our booth. It's an immersive experience, and you have to try it, but the music is a big part of that. And but no one in their home is going to have 12-channel audio all around them to produce that. So I think it's really fascinating that we have a headset now that you can get that full 360 audio. But so where are we going from here? So these are things that we can do today, and of course this won't be out till next year. But these are things that we can do today. And so where are we going now? So deeper immersion. How do we get people? Roy, you were saying not in this lifetime. So
Well, in
where
this
will
lifetime,
we
just
get?
not a 16K variety.
Right. So wider field of view we're looking at, and of course that's going to demand more from the GPU. 360 video is another aspect of VR. So you've been talking about Project Loom. Maybe we can talk a bit about real-time stitching and how we need the hardware for that.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I think the job of the storyteller is to create the reason we love entertainment is because for an hour and a half, or of the length of the piece of entertainment we're experiencing, we don't have to worry about anything else in the world. We lose ourselves in the story. That's why all of us, no matter what our interests are or what walk of life we come from, we universally love movies. But the thing you mustn't do then is to take away that sense of presence, that immersion. And so if you can see video stitching, you've lost. It's gone immediately. One of my issues with the current headsets is, as good as they are and they're great, you can still see the pixels.
Right.
We've got to get you into an environment where you stop thinking about the technology. You stop thinking this is cool, and you're just lost.
Yeah.
You're just taken away. So we've got to do that as quickly as possible. You don't have to wait for 16K for that. So I think that it's absolutely essential that we do everything we can to bring that about as soon as we can. And we're close. We're real close. But I think the other thing we're going to have to do is to take the quality of camera core assets and put them into game engines so they can also be interactive. By the way, I don't know if any of you haven't seen Giant, what the guys have done is really incredible. I actually think, and I'm happy to go on public record, it is the best piece of content I have yet experienced that includes camera core work with engines. And I'm happy to go on record saying that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's very good.
And so we had
Even though it's made with NVIDIA.
We had Winslow and Melitza, the director of the film, out at SIGGRAPH and with us for the week, and it was just amazing to see people coming out, and you can see people sometimes are visibly weeping, having gone through that experience. It's very powerful.
And yeah, I mean, speaking of that too, I think that you can, where contextualizing the experience is huge. The fact that we found that more people have an emotional response when we are able to curate the environment for them. It's one thing to have sit someone down in a folding chair with fluorescent lights, and strap a Gear VR on them and be like, okay, I'll see you in 10 minutes, versus being able to tell them about the project, meet the people, bring them into a space that's dedicated for that, be able to have haptics either in the chair or put them, on their body as a vest, be able to, control the lighting and be able to have an experience or be able to learn about the project before they go in there. It's all about their perception. I think it's, it can vastly change how they're able to witness what they bring to the project. Everyone brings something different. Everyone has sort of their own, hopes and fears or whatever a conflict is. At least in our project, we don't name what the conflict is. We don't name what the giant is that's approaching. So people bring their own sort of emotional baggage, for lack of a better word, with them. But for us, being able to also get them out of the experience, so that when they they experience something that it's a sort of a heavy emotional experience, and when they're done, they get to sit in a dark room and sort of think about what they did, not have a headset ripped off and somebody clean it for the next person to sit down. So being able to curate the experience, and there's sort of a theater of VR that I think is we'll be seeing a lot more of that. I think that experiences will be a lot more portable, but we're also going to see people building out VR theme parks, being able to have rooms that when you that will be matched up one-to-one for what you see in the headset will actually be physical in the space. Being able to touch something, being able to smell something, even taste something, I think that that's where it's going to be going. I think that the immersiveness and the experiential elements are just going to be, things that we can't even imagine right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, looking to the future, we saw the Omen X, small, portable. Things that are important to us are venting heat away from the body. We don't want any of that. But moving forward, and I mean, this is a prototype today. It's a working prototype, but moving forward, we need to get, we're going to have headphones on, we're going to have a sub pack on, and we're going to have flying contraptions and other things that really give you a different experience. Like Winslow said, virtual reality entertainment centers, theme parks, and that sort of thing. So it starts to get heavier. So we're actually working to get lighter, longer battery life, better heat management, and customizability. And GPUs are getting smaller and smaller too. And so can you talk a bit about the Radeon Pro SSG? Because that's really interesting, and that's the latest in GPUs.
Yeah, this panel's about hardware, so let me brag about what we're doing a little bit. So for the content creation side, content consumption, I think we've got to bring that cost down. I made that very clear. For the content creation, we've got to give you the biggest sandbox possible. And so we invented a couple of things recently, which are the beginning of a whole world of inventions we've got coming to help content creators. The first is we invented a professional graphics card with a terabyte of storage on the graphics card. So we looked at the needs of, in fact, actually, he doesn't know it, but Rob Legato actually created the idea of us to do the product. We saw you want very, very large data sets, and you need to be able to edit in real time if you can. And so we created a specific graphics card with the SSD on the GPU, bypassing the PCI bus. And so that allows you to edit 8K RAW at 90 frames a second. That's the beginning of a trend that we see. The more we give you, however, the more you want. So 8K right now is where you want to capture, but we think you're going to want to go to 16K really, really fast. So we're going to continue to want more and more and more. One of the reasons we love HP is that they adopt our products and bring them to market so quickly. And so I really want to also say thank you to you, Rick, and for the work that HP does.
Yeah, I mean, so HP's been in this for a very long time, over 75 years, you heard me say yesterday, in the industry. But in terms of compute, we approach it from a whole system design. So we've worked with the software manufacturers, the hardware manufacturers. We've done a lot of bundling with them over the years. And so we've optimized the hardware for the software. That's another thing, by the way, in looking into the future of hardware. We work very closely with all our software partners and the same software partners you work with, the Autodesk, the Foundry, Avid, Adobe, and so on and so forth. And we've done some cool things with Crytek more recently too. And so, we really have to optimize for that. That's something that's important to HP. But then we bring in the best technologies, so we work with Intel, we use Xeon processors, and of course, we love the Radeon Pro roadmap. It's pretty awesome. And so,
well, AMD is going to have some pretty cool CPUs next year too, by the way.
Well, there you go. And so, yeah, the GPU wars are full on, and it's amazing to see the innovation coming out of that space. And so it'd be really cool to see the CPU wars heat up again. So that's cool to hear. And so now going back to audio and building sound fields and trying to really drive people deeper. What's the future? Like, how do we really expand in that universe?
Well, you were talking about how audio plays a major role in VR, and I think it was Coppola who said that audio was 50% of the film, and that was when you were looking at a screen straight in front of you.
Yeah.
And now we've got something literally all around us. So arguably, it's, I'd say 90% of what's going on right now. And to date, I've seen, so many beautiful visual experiences, but have yet to see some really, truly compelling audio experiences. So I think that the future, and we're definitely going there, just the people who are exhibiting here at VRLA show you that we're finally going there, that people are finally focusing on audio as, a narrative tool. What I talk to creators about is because the subpack has a frequency response that goes down to 5 hertz, so 130 hertz to 5 hertz, so you're actually able to feel more audio than you'd be able to hear with your ears. So there's all this room down in the bottom of the mix that you can actually use to tell a narrative story. So instead of just having somebody see or hear something to cue them to move on in the narrative, you could actually just give them a feeling that doesn't require any additional coding or middleware or plugins, strictly by using audio, physical audio, as a narrative tool. So I'm really interested to see people using our technology and people like OSIC's technology to create, cues all around you and with the body, and not necessarily only visual stuff, which seems to have been the focus so far, and I think most people would agree with that.
Yeah, what a great storytelling tool. You hear the door creaking behind you, and if you can actually do that in a 3D space, it's behind you, it'll guide you to turn around, obviously. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's, I think it's really interesting if you think about audio and how people create audio today. You have, beautiful studios, mixing rooms with very expensive speakers, very expensive amplifiers. And some of the greatest studios have 5 speakers or 7 speakers with them, which are just, a couple points of resolution around you. And so this idea of opening up the entire 360 for a content creator to be able to mix accurately a full 360 sound field, that's very democratizing. People at home, people that are very interested in music and audio. There's a lot of people that do a lot of computer music. Access to facilities where they could do, really cool experiences has been difficult. And so being able to not only create VR, but also on the listening side. So you have people that, if someone goes through the effort to create a spatial mix, people can't actually hear it because they don't have these speakers at their home. And so this idea that you can create a full realistic 3D sound field and you can have somebody experience that exactly as you created it, that's not something that exists currently in audio because we're so tied to this idea that you have to have all this gear and the person listening to it has to have the same gear. And so this is something that's really interesting for us, both in the VR space and also in music going forward. What is the future of music, in 3D? This is quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to draw some of you out, and I want to get some questions going from the audience so that, you may have some questions of the panelists here. So do we have the microphones handy somewhere? All right. So we do have some microphones here. And if you've got a question, please put up your hand and we'll get a mic to you. We've got one over here. Oh, okay.
Hi, I read about a study that the Mayo Clinic was doing with the Air Force for an ocular ear implant type of device. It actually wasn't put in the ear, but you'd wear it and it would vibrate. And it was to help with pilots doing simulation to deal with simulation sickness. I know that a company bought it for theater use. I haven't heard of any use for it in VR yet, but it seems perfect to solve some of the sickness issues. And what it does is it fools the inner ear into believing it's getting the proper accelerations from the simulator, even though the person's not really moving, so that the inner ear believes it's actually getting the appropriate motions. Have anybody on stage, have you guys heard about it? Is there any advancement that we're hearing in that regard?
If I remember correctly, Samsung had some sort of headphone. I don't remember when that was, that had the vestibular stimulation. I don't know that anything became of that. Not something I'm working on. I don't know if you guys.
So I'll tell you something. I'm a pilot. It's true. And so this is really interesting to me. But there are things that are happening with simulation and with flight simulation specifically. There are some things that I'm curious about how that would work because we all have a different inner ear, and it's life or death. If you're flying into clouds and you can't see what's going on, and suddenly there's something tricking your ear rather than your body, because your organs actually play a role in in how you feel, because you can yaw, and if you don't feel that yaw in your organs, which triggers the thing that's happening in your head, you can die. So I'd be really interested to see how that technology goes. Flight simulation's coming down in price.
If you can't hear where the burglar is, that might also be a problem. I think, you know, as humans, we're very, very good at understanding ambient and occluded sound.
Yes,
So
right.
I would love to see some storytellers do some cool stuff with that.
Absolutely. That would be very cool. Thank you for that contribution, by the way. We have the mic is...
Hi. Winslow, I haven't seen Giant yet, so I'm really curious to see it. I hear it's amazing. I'd love to know your thoughts on what are the main challenges of telling a feature story in VR now, not so much from a technical perspective and hardware, which of course, you know, there's so many limitations and so much room to grow, but mostly from a storytelling and artistic perspective, having done, you know, an experience that is, you know, one of the, perhaps the ultimate in that field.
Well, so that's a really good question, and also we'll be distributing Giant in hopefully like the fall, so you'll be able to check it out if you can't see it here. Goes for everyone as well. I think that it's a choice for if you're a storyteller, whether it's going to be something that is linear, you know, sort of like on rails where you can look wherever you want. There might be some interactivity, but you know, ideally it's around the same length. Like Martian, I think, you know, there's certain times where you can sort of hang out and take a little bit more time to solve certain things. So I think it's like anywhere from 25 to like 32 minutes or something like that. I think that's sort of the sweet spot, or that's sort of at least right now, that's how far people are willing to spend in it. It becomes a choice of, if you have your own eyes and ears, which is sort of what it is like to be in a virtual environment, you can look around, but you know, you're not being told what to do. So I think something that is a feature length, say an hour and a half, that is a lot. That's a big burden almost on the viewer to be making sure that they're making the right decisions, that you know that whoever's you know, creating the experience is directing them, whether that's through audio cues, you know, haptic feedback, or you know, like the actors moving, you know, how they're blocking the scene. I think that it's just not ready yet. I think eventually we'll be able to move into feature-length content. I think also people are, at least right now, it's a lot safer to be doing episodic, so that you know you can take a smaller bite. If the user likes it, then they can continue to go on. Also, that's, you know, I don't know if you've ever been to like a VR event where somebody puts a Gear VR on you, and you're like, why did I just do that? Because now I have to watch this thing for 8 minutes. I don't want to be, you know, I want to be polite, but you know, that was great. You know, they're always like waiting to see what you're gonna say. But you know, imagine doing that for an hour and a half. You know, it's like there has to be some point where you can, just like a video game, where you can save it and choose to go on, because it's a lot more taxing, or it requires a lot more from the viewer. You know, also there's a lot of fatigue when it comes to, you know, on the hardware side of things, you know, I can't do VR experiences for more than 8 minutes because I'll fog up the headset. So, you know, there's the obvious physical reasons. Yeah, I mean, I think that it would also have to be a very compelling story, and it's not like with video assets right now, it's not like we can incorporate AI into them just yet. You know, say for full volumetric video capture, you know, if you ask them a question, you know, they can't respond to you just now. Or if we were being able to have characters that were, you know, mocapped, or that were, you know, full AI or full CG that was AI, you know, that would work. But it's a question of, yeah, how much choice does the audience have in the story? And if they are making choices, then that is going to be a different outcome than an hour and a half. That could be 3 hours, that could be 10 hours. You know, it's more like a role-playing game versus like a sort of a discrete narrative. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, and you've touched on something really important. I mean, storytelling for feature film is very different than storytelling for VR, and being able to present people with a lot of different options. And that's why the game engines are really important to this part of the ecosystem, and important to us on the hardware side, because we have to be able to keep up and be ready for anything that's being thrown at us. So we're really excited about that. We had a question over here, right here, and then we'll come up to you. So the question is, what's the idea? So we have the headsets, the subpack, the backpack, you know, all of this. What's the ideal form for this to take? And so.
Yeah, I think we all instinctively know at some point you're going to want to have a VR experience which has the comfort and weight of a pair of sunglasses. And you're going to want to feel, and that's probably going to be through some kind of pixelated set of either gloves or bodysuit. What you won't be able to do is have any local calculation or processing, which means that ultimately VR is going to have to come from the cloud. So we're going to need big, powerful processing in the cloud, and then we're going to need unbelievably fast bandwidth to be able to take all that processing and stick it into the glasses and onto the suit. I absolutely believe that will happen. I just really want to be alive to do it.
I would agree with Roy
Yeah.
for sure, and I think that stuff like what you have over there, first of all, it needs more bass.
It
and
does.
physical
Let's
audio.
talk.
We'll
Let's
talk about
talk.
that after the show.
You may have seen something happen right now.
But we spent a lot of time studying human anatomy and the body and how sound makes contact with it. And we're still, you go out there's a lot of weird HMDs, not necessarily the big ones, and other devices that you put on that don't feel natural yet. I think for the future development of fully integrated experiences, it's going to be very important to focus on the biometrics of the body and what feels natural, as opposed to just making something for the sake of making something.
Right.
And making sure that it feels right and natural, like a pair of sunglasses on your face.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're not there yet. I agree with Roy. I want to be alive to see it too. The Omen X has wireless display so that if someone wants to connect an exterior monitor, you can do that. So you lift your headset and you can work with your with the PC that's on your back. But that technology there's so much latency. I mean, if you just step a foot away, it's really chunky. And when we demo this, that wireless display is really chunky, even though someone's running really smooth in the headset. So wireless is not there. That's something that definitely has to change. And yeah, we will be in the cloud at some point. Absolutely.
I prefer to imagine things that can't exist yet, so I would like to say a chip in the brain and you just imagine it all.
And we may be in VR right now. In fact, VR may be taking us out of it. We don't know. We'll find out, though. So we had a question.
Sorry, I have one more question on today's world to Joy. You said your headphones allow you to personalize the HRTFs. How do you do that?
Sure, so we decompose the HRTF into different sections that correspond to different parts of your auditory anatomy, and then we synthesize it within the headphone. So there's sensors, it's a bed of sensors within the headphone, and then there's a lot of digital signal processing.
Got a question from this guy down here.
And that's why Joy is the CTO and I am not, right there. You just heard it. That's why.
It's not easy.
What a great panel for storytellers for one particular perspective. We, as filmmakers and not VR, are able to be technology agnostic for the most part. I'm going to tell a drama, I'm going to tell a comedy, I'm going to tell an adventure story. And I'm not really worried about the lenses or the cameras when I'm first thinking about it. But we're in an extraordinary time where if I want to tell a VR story, I kind of have to make choices on it's going to have a sub-pack for the viewer and I'm going to write to a sub-pack because I really want to make sure that I'm taking advantage of all this. And so I guess maybe I'm asking for advice. How the hell do I move forward if I'm going to make some decisions and not put myself into a corner? Winslow, maybe it's partly you, maybe it's partly tech. Are you doing some sort of, I'm creating a container, the base story, and then I'm going to make sure I can add on Subpack and OSIC and other things? What's the right approach for this technology churn?
I had a meeting earlier with a young filmmaker who came to me and said, look, Roy, how are you guys, you said you're supporting all these projects. How do I get past everybody else? I want you to support our project. So I said to him, well, the first thing to do is stop worrying about the technology. The most important thing for us in anybody we partner with is the story. So I would say, first of all, don't worry about the technology. Focus on the story. We will help you work the rest out. It's story first, story middle, and story last. We'll do the rest.
And I think on the hardware side, you talk about the variety of choices there are out there for everything from the headset to your audio choices, and there's a lot. And I think that all of us moving forward into creating a market in the virtual space is going to take all of us, working together. Even, people who are competing right now or inconceivably will be eating each other's lunches 2-3 years from now and clawing for market share, I see them collaborating now and speaking to each other and forming friendly relationships, because until we can create the right decisions, because you can have a lot of decisions and a lot of them can be bad ones. I think it's going to be working together on all of this technology and making that container that you speak of the right one, as opposed to just a lot of different containers that you could fit in.
Well, yeah, I'd like to think that story is always the most important thing, because that's obviously what the viewer is going to be getting, and that's why you're creating it in the first place. Although with VR, there's also certain demos that don't necessarily have a story, but are wanting to sort of simulate something, and that's great too. But technology, yeah, is a huge thing to consider. When we first were writing the script, we were thinking about is this going to be a spherical video? Is it going to be stereoscopic? Is that going to have to increase our our rate of not only the camera rental, but also on the stitch? That's exponentially more hours you're talking there. Is it something where you want the audience to be interacting with the environments? That could still be inside of spherical video, but then you're gonna have to place it inside a game engine like Unreal and be able to do gaze. Is it gaze-based tracking? Is it something where you're only gonna be doing video game? Is it a set time, or can the user explore as much as they want? These things are also, yeah, VR is, as much as we love to think that it's opening all these doors, and it's still extremely expensive, and it does take a long time, and you will be banging your head against your desk until you get that thing to work, because it's a dance between the story and the technology. And if they misstep, then the whole thing doesn't work. Like, we were figuring out how to get video to work and to have it play smoothly for, very shortly before we premiered. And by the grace of God, it all worked out and everything was great. But those things weren't necessarily, ready and plug and play. And that's what's exciting, though, about this right now, is that these tools are being created as we're going. Somebody interviewed us saying that your story sounds a lot like the end of Back to the Future 3, where we had to go as fast as we could, and only by going as fast as we could, over like this canyon, by going as fast as we could, that we knew that we'd be able to go into time, and that the train track would be there for us. But we had to sort of take a leap of faith, and also you have to have a good team to make sure it's going to work. But because we went as fast as we could, we were able to sort of we made it work. The track was there for us.
Yeah, we're really here at the birth of an industry. But if we take lessons from something like video and YouTube creators, I mean, it's just, you could do a YouTube video on your phone and you can make it really compelling, but then people, now there are billions of videos out in the world, and so now you have to take it to a different level. Now you're starting to create you're using good microphones so that you have good audio, because people don't want to listen to bad audio. And then you're using a better camera, and now you're increasing the resolution of the camera. You're doing higher frame rates so that you can play with time. You're doing all of that. And all of that, every time that happens, the demands on the hardware get greater and greater. And so we have VR content today, but when it gets really compelling, you're taking advantage of all that other hardware that's available to you. And you're really pushing the limits of things like the workstation that you're creating on, and the PC or the backpack that you're doing the consumption on, the headsets and everything. That's what creates a more and more immersive experience. That's going to be the thing that people will talk about later on, is something that's taken advantage of all the things that this group of people are providing you. So.
I also think it's about knowing your viewer too, because
Right.
a lot of experiences, especially when we were showing at Cannes, a lot of the people, it was their first VR experience. So the first 3 minutes, they're still caught in the wonder of it.
Yeah.
So as soon as people, as VR progresses, a lot more people will be familiar with it, and they're like, okay, get me right into the story. But there's still this wow factor that sort of clouds a lot of the storytelling. So I would sort of build in a little buffer for people to explore in the beginning,
Yeah.
and then sort of allow them to dig into the story after that.
That's a great tip. Great tip. Right here?
You're going to need a wider lens to get this shot. But, I'm in kind of the same boat with the theatrical VR thing. I'm actually at a production company that's doing, I think, one of the few big VR movies. As far as I know, there's the Vader movie, and then I think there's some kind of thing with, I don't actually know how much I'm allowed to, this is we're at VRNDA is what this should be retitled. But we're doing a big movie, and I from the beginning thought that this was going to make it a lot easier having budget and resources and all the things, and it's actually made it a gigantic pain in the ass because it's impossible to take a single step forward because you don't know if that's the right step, and everything changes like literally every 6 hours based on what your Google alerts say of the current status of VR is. So I think it's kind of exciting because it reminds me a little bit of the, Lucas had to form ILM to make Star Wars kind of thing, which is cool but scary. I don't know if there's actually a question in anything that I'm saying here, but I'm just, I don't know. It's almost this kind of like Wild West of where we literally don't know where to go with this, and we're thinking that something plenoptic based is the way to go with the future of theatrical VR, and I didn't know if you guys could talk about that a little bit, Lightwave.
Yeah, let me talk about why I said start with story, and I didn't mean any disrespect to some of the hurdles, which the guys had to do. I mean, I fully respect that they were difficult decisions. But I'll tell you why I stick with story, because if you come to us at AMD and you say, look, I want to create an environment, okay, but I want to be able to be in a particular place, and I want dust and particle effects, and I want depth of view, and I want to have this, and I want to do that. And the reason I want to do that is because I want to tell this incredible story about somebody who's on a journey, and the only way I can really get that story through this way is to produce these effects. Okay, then we will go away, and I swear to God, if it exists on this earth, we'll get it to you. Yeah.
It's the CG is the, we got that pretty covered, CG is at, a very advanced point of capturing any kind of...
Well, you mustn't leave without us exchanging business cards.
We're already friends on LinkedIn.
I think a lot of what you're talking about also is that you're having to change behavior. Filmmaking in 2D is completely different than filmmaking in 360 or VR, and it's difficult to change behavior. I know I've been into a bunch of very professional mixing studios at large, entertainment companies, and we've got these audio engineers who are showing me their bays with, $1 million in equipment, and they're going, yeah, I mix it in here, and then I go to these, and they hold up their headphones, and like I don't even have the subwoofer turned on, because inevitably you're having to go from that to this, because that's how it's being experienced. So helping people change that behavior easily is going to be crucial.
Well, sorry, I don't want to take up on the work. And the other thing that we're kind of doing that I'm getting the impression that no one else seems to really be doing is that a lot of people don't really realize that like IMAX VR is like a thing now. It's kind of under the radar, but it's kind of happening. And the way that we were approaching this was that IMAX 3D would no longer be the highest kind of premium tier, but this would still exist as a regular 2D movie for those able, that just want to watch a movie. But now the premium, I don't know how much we're going to charge for those tickets, God, but whatever that is no longer IMAX 3D. It's going to be IMAX VR is the kind of highest tier, but all the lower tiers are still there. I just feel like we're digging ourselves in a hole here trying to figure all this out. But I don't know. Do you guys have? This is strange having this conversation with a microphone.
We just opened our first co-branded movie theater in Korea with packs built into the seats, so happy to provide that.
Right, that's like a 40X thing, right?
No, it's our stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right on. So okay.
Okay, so we're gonna close it out with one last question over here. And then we'll get a closing comment from each of you, and we'll wrap that way.
I'm a research clinical psychologist, and we're trying to bring VR to the mental health services area. So one thing that we found fairly easy to do is put somebody on a plank or rail, and then to work with simple phobias like acrophobia, and just slowly raise their elevation. And as they become more comfortable with the raised elevation, then we go higher and higher and higher. And that's a simple approach, but a more complex approach, and something that I'm looking at is exposing people to previous traumatic experiences, tailor-made traumatic experiences. Now, it sounds like Giant is indeed a traumatic experience and can be generally experienced as traumatic. But what about something that's personalized and tailor-made for somebody who was, say, abused when they were 30 years ago or something, or experienced a natural catastrophe, something like that?
Yeah, this is, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Skip Rizzo and his work on using VR to treat PTSD. I want to swap cards with you too. This is an area which is important to our company, but also personally important to me. I think that we can use VR to do some pretty incredible things. Skip started out PTSD for violence in war environments. He's also now able to use the same techniques to treat sexual violence. And he's actually even more interesting, believes that you can use similar techniques to actually prevent it. And I think that one of the things VR does is gives us a chance to actually experience what it's like to be somebody else. So I think there's tremendous scope here. In fact, as time goes on, I want to start talking more about this, more about how we experience time in VR and how we use VR to do good. I think that at some point, the filmmaking is just going to take off, and you guys aren't going to need our help.
And that's, that's excellent. That's exactly why we're partnered with Winslow and Melissa. There are important stories to tell, and there are ways that you can connect with content that you could never before, and you can really empathize. And I think that's,
Well, just quickly, I think that you also have to be careful that you don't re-traumatize somebody.
Right.
And that's actually a concern. The more immersive, the more real these virtual environments can get, especially when it comes to like audio. If that feels very real, then that you have to be careful as to how you're doing it. So for Giant though, we say as a disclaimer, you're going to be placed in a basement with a family that is in an active conflict zone. And we've actually, to make sure we are not re-traumatizing people who actually grew up with that. And a couple times people are like, that is what I grew up having to go to my basement, during like bombing raids, and I don't want to experience this. So thank you for telling me that. So we're very conscious of that. But I think that VR is just another. We're removing the screen, so we're able to place people in pretty much any environment. So it would make sense to be able to do it. But just be cautious as to how it's being done. Make sure that that's carefully curated.
Then we have to cure VR PTSD with more,
with more VR.
VR PTSD.
Just throw some VR at it.
All right. So Joy, any closing thoughts here?
Nope.
Go check out the OSIC X.
Yeah. Thank you for hosting. Yeah.
Thank you for joining. Absolutely.
I'm just curious, is there any place we can demo the OSIC? Because I've only seen the Kickstarter.
Yeah, we did a roadshow last year. We did probably 2,500 demos, but we've stopped doing that until we start shipping the product because we're heads down right now to get the product shipped out. If you're down in San Diego, you can stop by our office. That's about it right now.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for having us, and come by. We're hosting the world's first ever VR rave. About a few hundred feet that way. Come and
very cool
experience
stuff.
that, and then let us help you reach through the digital medium and actually touch people with this content that you've worked so hard on. Thanks.
Right.
Keep pushing, run fast, and break things.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Thanks, Rick, for everything, and also, be fearless. The rules are here one day, but you can break them the next day. There really are no rules in VR, so just keep pushing, and make sure you check your Google alerts because there's going to be something new every day. There's going to be something that's going to change the face of VR. So.
All right, and HP just acquired a 3D scanning company. We have the backpack. We are partnered with people like Roy and AMD and lots of others. So talk to us if there's something interesting that you think HP can play a part in. I'm here, so interested in talking to anyone out there. And go check out Samskara. And we also have the BFG Dream Cavern VR experience in the HP Radeon booth, so you want to see that too. Thank you, everyone.